Okay, I'm going to try this and talk while I'm painting and kind of tell you what I'm doing. I'm doing another one of the little ornaments, and it's going to be a little scene. So I hope it ends up turning out with the way I'm going to do it. Right now I'm just doing a side-loaded float of blue to kind of lay in a sky. And I do most of my little bitty paintings like this with a 1/4 inch angle brush. It's just something I started doing and fooling with, and I've just been doing it ever since. So once I get my idea of where my little sky is going to be, then while it dries, I start laying in some trees, and I do the same thing. It's just a side-loaded angle brush. And I don't really do a side-loaded stroke per se, so much as I do a whole lot of touching, picking up, and putting down, and I let it kind of create different layers of a tree line, because I don't really do like a whole lot of detail of the individual trees. So I do something that just kind of gives me the effect of a bunch of different little things just kind of going on in the background. I think I watched too many Bob Ross videos way back in the day. But this is how I do it anyway. So I work the trees on the one side of the barn, and then I'll come to this side. And this is just kind of laying in just an idea of where the trees are at for the background. And I just kind of work them in little rows. I don't really, I put a little sketch on this one just so that y'all could kind of see what I was doing. Sometimes I don't even do that for myself. I just kind of start painting, and whatever happens is just what happens. Sometimes that's not always a good thing, because sometimes I make a mess when I do that. But anyway, there's my little trees laid in. Okay, now I'm going to just kind of brush mix just to give myself an old barn color. I don't necessarily worry about how it looks, because it's just supposed to resemble something that looks like old boards and old wood. So once I get something in there that looks okay to me, that's it. I kind of quit on it, because otherwise I'll fuss with it too much. So the roof is going to be done kind of similar. Had the wrong color on the brush, so bear with me a second. I'm just going to put a little bit of gray that I didn't brush mix. I actually squirted out some gray paint, which is kind of unusual, because usually I just brush mix it, but I was trying to do this one where I could get it done in a fair amount of time. And I hope it's all showing up, because I can't see the camera to know that everything is where I'm putting it with what I'm looking at. So maybe it is. Okay, now I'm going to lay in, same side-loaded brush, I'm going to lay in some ground, because we have to set the barn down. It can't just dawdle there. And I just do that. I just keep stroking and let whatever comes off the brush. You'll notice it just kind of creates a grass effect, just kind of layers of different areas of ground. And so that's that much of it so far. So now I'm going to go back into the blue again, and I'm going to start at the outer edge and kind of float around it and let that color move down a little bit into that top, above the top of the trees that I floated. Don't overwork it, because you'll end up kind of making it look icky. So once I get it to where it all looks like sky above the tree line, then I usually just stop. So now I'm going to use a little bit of brown with just a little bit of white in it, and I want to define my little path. And I just start with a shape and then just kind of fill it in as I go. I do half of it at the time. I start with that half. So while that half is drying, then I'm going to go into a little bit of dark brown. And I don't really pay a whole lot of attention sometimes to color names. My favorite browns are burnt umber and real brown, and I'm not sure if they're both actually. I think one is a full court color and one's an Americana color. I use paints by the color that it is, and if I like it and think that I'll use it. So I sometimes don't always know what color it is unless I'm, like with my little paintings, I know most of my darks are going to be real brown or burnt umber, and I vary them depending on which brown I used to like make my wood look. Then I'll use the other one to help lay in some of the shadows, because it just gives enough variation there in the color. So that just kind of lays in a little bit more of the structure of the barn, and starts giving the little bit of floating, gives some definition of all the little sections, front, side, that sort of thing. So I'm going to try to come in here. This is about one of the hardest little sections to float, is right up under that little roof eave there, to actually make it look like this part sits back. So sometimes I'll go in and deepen that just a little bit so that you can see that a little better. But the side-loaded strokes is what makes all of my little paintings like this kind of work and come together and defines all the little sections of it. It's just my favorite thing to do. So we have to put a little bottom on the barn. So I'll float the little bottom edge so he's not just kind of hanging out there all willy-nilly. Oh, and I didn't put out any black. Give me one sec. Okay, got to have just a smidgen of black so that I can get a little more definition under that. Sometimes I kind of have to hold my breath when I do a stroke so I don't mess up. There's something about trying to breathe and paint that don't always necessarily go hand in hand, or at least for me it doesn't. Let's see, how do I want to? I want to put some where it looks like pieces of tin. So I put some color on there, and then I'm going to just about wipe it back off, because then when I add the white to it, it'll help balance it out in the long run. Okay, let's do the other side of the path, because I think that brown is dry. And I just call it my nervous hand or wiggly floated stroke, just to get it laid in there. And then I'll go back and I'll kind of work the edges so that it pulls it. And if I still need some to kind of blend, there's a little too much white in the middle, then I'll add just a little bit more paint. And then just kind of work it a little bit back and forth until it kind of gets like I want it to be. So then I'm going to take the greens that I use mostly and use the most of are the Americana Hauser greens. I love the light, medium, and dark. They're just kind of already like they need to be, and so that's just what I use. So this is the medium. I use the light for everything else. So this is the medium, just to help define the path a little bit more and give me some definition to the grass line. And it's just side loaded on the brush, and I just use what I call my little nervous hand stroke, and it kind of helps fill it all in there for me. So I want to define this up here just a little bit more. I lost a little bit of that. And then I like to kind of streak some of the medium color into the light, just to go on and give it some shadows without having to do a whole lot of various work to it. Sometimes I get things I'm not pleased with and I have to go back and fix them, and other times I can do a stroke and end up with something and go, ah, that's it, that's perfect. So now I'm going to just lay the little door in. I like to kind of give myself an idea of where it's going to be, and then just kind of fill it in. And same way with the windows. I'm just going to use kind of the corner of the angle brush to define what would be some little windowish shapes. I'm not after a whole lot of realism here, just so that you know what's going on. Got a little too much puddling water going on there. Okay. So I want a little bit of white, because I want my barn roof to kind of shine like old metal barn roofs do down here in the summertime. They can just about blind you. They have a glow to them from the silver metal roofs, because not all of them are rusty. We have a bunch of them here on the family farm of my husband's that we live on, and so I try to emulate a little bit the realism from walking around looking at the barn roofs. And like I said, I'm not after a whole lot of detail in such a small painting, but enough that you get the idea of what's going on. I've got a little bit of white paint just loaded onto the chisel edge of the brush, and this just kind of helps crisp up that little bit of white highlight on the edge. And this was something I actually learned years ago from doing oil paintings. This was something my oil painting teacher taught us to do, and I've just kind of carried that right over into some of my painting with acrylics, just because I like it and it's quick and easy and kind of gives you a look that you don't have to do a whole lot to achieve. I want to put just a drop of a yellow float. I like to kind of give this one side of my barns a little extra highlight, and I usually do this with yellow. And then I'm going to go back and define that roof edge right here, because I lost a little bit of it. Oh, and I think I have a brush hair or something there. Okay, got it gone. Put a little bit of shadow underneath those windows and a little bit around the door. So that I can do the same thing with some white paint on that chisel edge. I want to just kind of define the door a little bit. This is usually not the brush that I do this with, but like I said, I was trying to do it kind of fast, so. And it just gives the illusion that the little highlights are there, the little panel in the door, because mainly I like to then kind of foo-foo some with the little landscape. And I like to lay in some places to maybe put some little bushes or little flower looking things, because I love to do those little squashed on looking flowers. That's one of my favorite things to do. It's kind of something I've worked at to kind of get it just like I want it to be, and so let's see, let's put a little bit of the illusion of some trees in the background. And I do that by just brush mixing a little bit of the brown paint, and I tone it down just a touch with some white so that it's not too terribly stark, and just I've got a number 10 script liner that I use, and I just give some little, I call it little tree trunks and limby looking things to just kind of, and it just fools the eye into thinking that there's some trees and stuff going on there. If you'll notice, just that little bit amongst that brown, amongst that green, gives you the effect of the layers of the trees. And if you get something that you're not quite pleased with, just kind of quickly wipe it off and start again. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. It's just enough to give an illusion, just kind of an idea that it was there. I see my path is not quite set down under the barn like I like it to be, so I'm going to go back and add just a little bit of dark brown shading just right there at that edge. So that's what we've got so far. And I think because I don't like that white highlight I did before, I'm just going to thin just a touch of white with the liner brush and come back in here and kind of sharpen that white up just a little bit with the liner. And then if you get too much white or get it just not quite right, you can always go back and add some shading around it, or sometimes you can even just float a little bit of brown right over the top of it and it will let it do its thing. And I'm going to attempt with a very old and kind of worn out, oh, what is this, a 1/8 inch Deerfoot stippler. I actually think it was the first one I ever bought, and I actually put just a little bit of a red color on the tip of the stippler, and then I go back and I add a little bit of white on that edge as well. And we're going to see if we can make some little flower things here. I like to give the illusion that it might be a little bit of rosebuds or something like that in the distance that's got something going on. I've lost some of my dark in there, so we're gonna, there we go. We'll come back in and just kind of pounce a little bit more of the dark, and then add, and I apologize for my glass tray kind of making a racket, and get a little bit of that going. And then I take the same angle brush and I come in and I do a little bit of a float right up under that, and it just kind of sets those flowers down. It kind of, I call it plants them. So that's, and that side's basically done, unless I was wanting to do anything else to the trees, but I don't think I'm going to. So now, without actually cleaning that brush, I'm going to attempt to do a couple of little blue flowers done the same way. This, I'm using an ultra deep blue. Basically it was just a pretty blue and it was on sale, and so I bought some. Because that's how I buy my colors. I don't worry about what the color is so much as if I like it. So here I'm going to plant some little blue, whatever they are, kind of flowers. I don't really know, but they look pretty in the background. So that's what's going in there. Okay. And the same thing, we're going to get a side load of that green, and we're just going to plant those flowers right there. So now those have been planted as well. So still without cleaning that brush, I try not to clean it unless I'm absolutely changing into a color that warrants it, which will be next time. I've just rubbed it all off on a paper towel. So I'm going to take that same Hauser dark green, and I'm going to stipple in just some bushes right here at the foreground. So it's really going to help push the rest of the painting back, because I've got something really dark up front. Now I like to put a little bit on both sides so that it kind of narrows my path and then lets the eye travel better in the painting. Or at least that's what it does for me. So now I want just a little bit of a variation of color, so I'm going to try putting some of the medium green and just barely dab some in there. And really you don't see it once you put the other flowers on, but for me it's just that kind of thing. I know it, so I have to do it. Okay, and before I start those flowers in the front, let me do this one other thing to the back. I take that same medium Hauser green, and with a very narrow side load of color, I like to shade right around the tree area of my barn. It helps to set the barn in front of those trees a little bit more, and it's just that kind of thing that if I don't do it, I would have to end up doing it before I put sealer on it, because it just has to be there. Okay. And then I'm going to do a touch of that same blue sky color and come right back along the edge of the barn roof, redefine it just a little bit, because I had lost a little bit of it by adding the white to it. Now I do like to add a shade darker blue to my sky. Normally I wouldn't use one that was quite so stark, but this one's already out on the palette, so I'm just going to quickly do it just around that top edge, and it, for me, it puts a cap on the sky, and just, I don't know, it's just something I started doing, and I do it now every time I do one of these little paintings. I have to have that little darker edge on top of the sky. Okay, I'm going to use a little different brush and attempt to make a little different flower here. And what I'm going to do is take, this is actually an old, gosh, I'm not sure what size it is. Number 4. Number 4 filbert, but what I've done is kind of flattened it out, and I put some blue and some white paint on it, and by kind of dabbing, okay, I'll put some of my white there with the blending, so let me freshen it up. Okay, let's see if this is any better. I'm going to just dab up and down and kind of create the illusion of a different looking flower, not something that's just kind of squashed on. And I do have to wash that out, because if not, that white would get too muddy on me. We're going to do the same type thing. We're going to go in that red. I think that was Santa red. I either use it or Tuscan. So those are just my favorite reds, especially for when I blend them with the white. So now that I've got the red and the white on the brush, and I'm hoping that I've got this where y'all can see it, same kind of thing. I'm just going to do a whole bunch of just up and downy little things just to give the illusion of flowers. And you don't have to worry about a whole lot of detail with these. It's just I have to blend it a little bit on the palette so that it already has a little bit of blended when I do this on the piece. Don't overwork it, but if you do see a little area that just needs a little something extra, just try to fill in just that little bit of an area. I think I want to add just a little touch of the red right there. And basically, I am done. So, hope y'all enjoyed that. I'll try to hold it up to where maybe you can get a little better view of it. Oop. There we go.